Hi folks, welcome to the Prepared Homestead. This is Travis. Thank you all for stopping by to watch. We're going to call this a continuation of this morning. If you watched this morning, that still watch this one. If you didn't, you'll probably get filled in at least somewhat on what's going on. It is, just to mention, it is crazy windy today. We're getting like 40 mile plus an hour gusts of wind. No storms yet, but there is some coming in probably tonight or tomorrow, so I think that's what's blowing in. But man, it's just crazy windy again here in the Ozarks. So the big story today is that mostly two countries in Europe, Spain and Portugal, have lost their power. Now there's reports that in Madrid, Spain, that some power has come back on, but there was a major power outage, and this is a strange one. This is a strange one, and my gut's telling me something's weird with this one. Something's up. This isn't just a unfortunate chain of events, basically. Portugal is saying that it's some kind of strange, unusual weather anomaly. Spain is saying that they don't really know. It could be cyber attacks. They're not really sure. They've declared a national emergency, and they've called up military just in case that there's disorder and chaos in the streets. Portugal is saying that it could take a week or longer before they restore all the power to the area. And now there is speculation coming out that this was done by a solar flare, which solar flares can certainly do this. It's affected internet, power, all that kind of stuff. Now, let's just pause for a moment. If it was a solar flare, if in fact, somehow they're able to prove that, and it's true that there's a solar flare, that's actually a very serious thing, because we haven't had any really big solar flares in a while. There's been some that, certainly solar flares, but there's not been any big solar flares. And myself and many others that are way more knowledgeable than me had been warning for a while that the electromagnetic field around the Earth is becoming very weak, and which means that we're extremely vulnerable. Our grid is extremely vulnerable to solar flares, and there has been indication in the last few years of some larger solar flares causing some pretty serious damage to certain systems. So if that's the case, that's serious. If it's not, then there could be something else working, some type of false flag event, something to blame it on some other actor. I don't know, but the story so far is just very strange. It's very strange indeed. I suspect in the end they'll probably come out with some really vanilla, lame excuse of what happened. But of course, they're also saying that it could just be global warming. Global warming did this. This is why we got to push Agenda 2030, right? Because man-made climate change is finally taking effect, which could also be why they have done this. I don't know. I will tell you this. There's been a lot of speculation for a while that an event like this could become more common. For whatever reason it happens, that it would be a likely scenario. And so just on this thing alone, whether it's cyber attack or whatever it is that's caused it, you should become very prepared for it. There's hardly anything that can be more deadly and more serious to a society, to a region, than the complete failure of the grid. I mean, there's a certain percentage of the population that's medically dependent on the grid. Food, water, all that kind of stuff is going to become gone, spoiled, or just completely not available within just a few days. A lot of things. I could make probably hours-long video explaining that. So this is something you need to get serious about preparing for. I do recommend something. I'm going to do a little plug here. Sagan Life has an excellent water filtration system to filter out water in 55-gallon drums. This thing's like $80. The extra filters for it are very, very reasonable. It's something that's good for long-term prepping, storage, get some 55-gallon drum water barrels, fill those up. I would suggest you look into it because the price point is still quite reasonable compared to a lot of other systems. There is a link down below for you to look at that. But what I'm getting at is that this is a very serious thing. Will something more like this happen? Of course, we have no way of knowing. This could potentially be a fluke. But you know what I say? I've stopped believing in coincidences a very, very long time ago. And so I highly doubt that this is just an unfortunate circumstance. So that right there. Now, you put the puzzle pieces together. Of course, there's a lot of stuff going on in Europe. You've got Europe pushing for Ukraine to continue to fight against Russia. You've got Russia and Ukraine not really looking like either one's going to back down. You've got the United States trying to convince Ukraine to basically give in and raise the white flag and, for the most part, give Russia what they want. But Russia's not backing down either, and they're continuing a hard bombardment on Ukraine. And so there's a lot of stuff going on there. We've got other regional things. Several things in the Middle East are happening. We've got India and Pakistan. In fact, today, the Pakistani prime minister said that that a full-scale invasion and war between the two nations could happen in the next 24 to 48 hours. That it's that close, that there's been that much stuff happen. And so that's pretty significant. You know, each nation has like 150 or so, 130 to 170 nukes, something like that. And India has the bigger military, the more likely winner. And if they get Pakistan pushed into a corner, could they use it? Yeah, I think so. And of course, the whole tariff thing, it's getting worse. There was more in the news after this morning's video talking about the port situation, how the ports up in the Pacific Northwest are starting to dry up, how just the orders for shipments is dropped substantially because there's no stuff coming in, how things are going to get really bad really quick. You know, right now we're still within that window of time period where there's still some ships coming in because they were shipped out before kind of all this stuff happened. We still have some things here in the United States and warehouses and stores, but we're probably somewhere in a 4 to 6 week window, very possibly less, 2 to 3 weeks. It's even possible in some areas where we could start seeing some major disruptions in the supply chain and dramatic increase in prices. This is going to happen. It has the potential to make what happened during COVID look like nothing. And so that's going on. We've got a lot of domestic stuff, a lot of domestic infighting, a lot of judicial stuff going on. The president is still very adamant about Canada, that happening. The normal fabric, as much as that normal fabric has been corrupt and wrong and all that kind of stuff, is being greatly disrupted. The president today said he is the leader of the United States and the leader of the world. And I would think that people like Xi Jinping and maybe a few others, even Vladimir Putin, might look at that as a challenge or be very, offended by that. You're not the leader of me, kind of thing. Almost like, kind of picking a fight potentially. There's a lot of things happening, and I know that most all of you understand that we live in very precarious times, and now's not the time to slack off on your readiness level. You should have been prepping for a long time. I understand some of you probably are just started. Most of you haven't. Most of you have been doing it a long time. It's possible that you've kind of slacked off. It's possible that you got tired of it. You got lazy. You've had financial hardships. Now's not the time to back down. Now's the time to look quite serious at this. If a grid failure happened here in the United States, and we have an old grid, many experts believe that it wouldn't actually take much, just the right hit, whether it be EMP, solar flare, or even a terrorist attack, that it wouldn't take much to bring it down. Chaos would ensue very quickly. And I know that a lot of you say, yeah, but we've dealt with blackouts before. You know, we've had tornadoes and hurricanes and ice storms and rolling, you know, brownouts and blackouts and stuff. Yes, but even the people involved in that, they knew that it wasn't some kind of nationwide outage. They knew that, well, we've had a tornado happen, we had a hurricane, we had an ice storm, you know. We understand it. It's horrible, it's super inconvenient, it could be serious, sometimes they last a week or two, but we know why it happened, and we know that it's going to be repaired pretty quickly because the rest of the country is okay. If the whole country, or a very large portion of the country, went down, it would be different. I think panic would happen quite quickly because it's not for normal reasons or understandable reasons. And people will panic. Money may dry up quite quickly. You know, no one carries cash anymore. And most stores anymore wouldn't know what to do with it. Even if you have cash, even if they know what to do with it, they can't do anything with it because everything's based on the electricity. And so, you know, a lot of things are going to get hurt. You know, those of you that are hardcore on Bitcoin, it's going to be hard to make that work when the grid goes down. There's a lot of things. And as the world becomes more unstable, and it's quite unstable at this point, the likelihood of things like that happening become more real. And it may not even have to be a big dramatic incident that would bring us down quickly because of so much stuff already, that kind of weakened state. The knees are already shaking. It may not take much of a blow to knock us to our knees or to the ground. And so that's why we have to be serious. That's why you have to be looking at things like water. You know, it's life. You have to have it. You have to have a lot of it every day. And if it's contaminated, you could die quite quickly and miserably. And a grid going down is going to contaminate that water pretty quickly. Medical supplies, medicines, most all your medical supplies and medicines come from overseas, especially China. If those supplies start drying up, do you have what you need for a while? Food, raising it, growing it, producing it, you know, going out in the woods and trying to find it, hunt it, you know, forage for it, and then preserve it. Do you know how to do that? Do you know how to do maintenance on your things? And do you have the tools and the equipment to do that? You know, do you have spares? Because if the supply chain dries up or becomes quite expensive or extremely slow, you're going to need spares. These things you need to be thinking about. And I don't mean to be dramatic, but right now I think it's a very good choice to be thinking about them very quickly. Because this isn't something that's has the likelihood of happening months and months down the road. If these events happen, they could easily happen just days away, or at the very longest a few weeks away. And so I would highly suggest that you take stock of what you have and what you're capable of, and push yourself, even if it's just for a temporary time period, to kind of up your level. You know, in 3 weeks, 6 weeks, or something like that, it all kind of blows over and the tariff thing kind of goes away and everything starts looking better. You know, you've invested a little time and a little money to make yourself more prepared. You're not really losing anything. And so to me, it's just a good idea. And I'm not saying that in the next 2, 3, 4, 6 weeks that, you know, the world is ending and the sky is falling. I'm saying that we're getting to a very tight spot right now. And when we get to those tight spots, it's time to kind of step it up a little bit, because it's increasing the likelihood that bad things could happen quickly. And it's best to be on your toes as much as possible during those times. Folks, it's time to get your houses in order and to prepare yourselves mentally, physically, and spiritually. Thanks for watching. Catch you in the next video.